Hello and welcome to the Diplomatic Encounter. We are a program that gives you issues in the world of diplomacy. And in today's program, we are talking to Chenesai Mangoma. Hello, Chenesai, and welcome to the Diplomatic Encounter.
Thank you, Kudai.
Maybe to start, can you tell us who is Chenesai?
Sure. Chenesai is a lawyer by profession who is currently operating or working as a social change agent in Zimbabwe.
Wow, an international lawyer.
Well, I specialize in international trade and investment law in Africa.
So tell me, how do you view the issue of women empowerment in Zimbabwe?
Well, women empowerment in Zimbabwe is very well supported by our constitutional framework. I believe our founding principles, I think Section 3, actually states that one of the issues in Zimbabwe that we want to get right is gender equality. So we have a very supporting framework in terms of women's empowerment, and we've had several and a plethora of organizations that are dealing particularly in the issues of supporting women's empowerment, either by strengthening women and girls, and we also have a national policy through the Women and Girls Women's Ministry under Minister Nyoni that talks to women and girls empowerment policy. So how do I view women's empowerment in Zimbabwe? From a policy and constitutional standpoint, I believe we have the right legal framework to support effective and sustainable women's empowerment.
You mentioned about gender equality. Maybe can you shed more light? What are the advantages of gender equality?
Women, for the longest time, have been left behind in terms of positioning them, whether it's in political offices, economic offices, where they've been left behind in terms of decision making, as well as issues that are principal to developing strong nations. As such, when you look at Africa as a whole, the biggest opportunity that we are sitting on is the advancement of our women and girls if we actually want to catch up to the world order in terms of development. So when you look at promoting women and girls empowerment, we want to find strategic and sustainable methodologies that will ensure that the women and girls that we are bringing up in our country can effectively contribute to bettering our societies. So we want to support women from grassroots right through to the big offices, the corporate offices. However, in my standpoint, that flow of activities starts right at the grassroots. We need to focus on the girl-child empowerment in order for us to see a sustainable women empowerment framework.
You mentioned about rising from the grassroots going up. Now, since you have yourself moved from the grassroots going up, what are some of the issues and stumbling blocks that you have faced as a woman, especially in a society where there are gender stereotypes?
Absolutely. You know, when you look at issues of women and girls empowerment, we can't look at it in isolation away from culture and social norms, which play a very big role in how our society treats women, for instance, as you have hinted to, and what our society believes the role of women to be. Typically in Zimbabwe, the women are typified as homemakers. Women are seen more in the roles of being at home. The girl child in instance is seen as a price, because when things are hard, or whether things are hard or not, the girl child is always going to be given off to get married, and she brings in lobola, she brings in cows to the family. And if you look during the deindustrialization era that happened in Zimbabwe, a lot of the issues that were affected were issues of affirmative action, and a lot of the girls got pulled away from schools because we didn't have enough support of social initiatives that supported bringing the girl child to school. So it's very, very important to understand what the cultural practices in a community are in order for us to better equip our women and girls. This is why we cannot have a generic address of women's empowerment worldwide, universally. We have the Sustainable Development Goal number 5, right? Sustainable Development Goal number 5 talks about how we're going to empower the women and girls. And what has been happening world over, and particularly when I have these conversations at different levels, is now you're looking at how do we actually zone in a particular jurisdiction and figure out what are the problems, how do we solve women and girls empowerment, by particularly focusing on the cultural norms. And abrogating issues that are not beneficial to the society. Like in our society, we've been fighting back and forth on early childhood marriage as a big problem to the empowerment, sustainable empowerment of girls. So yes, cultural and social practices are very important to understand if we are to attain sustainable women's empowerment in our country.
Any improvement when it comes to embracing the issues of gender equality for the maybe we can say 10 years, for the past 10 years or so?
Look, let me frame a bit of what I do and the work that I do, and let me position my work in terms of the bigger scope of women's empowerment. Sure. We have a global movement towards women's empowerment, and over the last couple of years I've dedicated my training as well as my expertise to the Zimbabwean community in terms of women's empowerment. So part of it is understanding what exactly are our issues in terms of where are we falling short when we talk about sustainable women's empowerment. What have we advanced? Zimbabwe, as I said, has a very strong framework, and over the last 10 years we have seen the coming into power of the 2013 constitution, which has a founding value of gender equality. So we've got the great framework. If you look at the Zimbabwe United Nations Development Assistance Framework for 2015 to 2020. One of the objectives of that framework is to bring about gender equality, and they focus on two issues when they talk about gender equality in that framework. They talk about strengthening institutions that empower women, and the second issue is sustainably empowering our girls and women so that they can actually partake in socio-economic activities, right? So when I look at my work is now primarily focused on empowering the girl child, educating the girl child for sustainable empowerment. I believe from the research and from my field work that is where our key lies. We need to focus on educating the girl child. We need to have measurable and specific results of how many girl children do we have and how many of them are enrolled in schools. So education will solve the issues that we now succumb to, such as early childhood marriage, right? Issues of early school dropout. But now when we uncover what education would mean in our culture and social setting of Zimbabwe, I'm not only addressing the issue of formal education, I'm also talking about skills development, right? When you talk about educating the girl child, what do you think is important to educate them sustainably so that they can be empowered to fight their own battles, such as the lack of sanitary wear? I believe that when you educate one, you educate the masses. So in each family, we want to principally focus on trying to educate as many of these girl children as possible so that they can come back to their communities and fight the battles of their country.
Thank you. You're still watching The Diplomatic Encounter. Please join us after the break. This is the second segment of The Diplomatic Encounter. For those who have just joined us, we are a program that gives you issues in the world of diplomacy. And in today's program, we are talking to Chenesai Mangoma, an international trade lawyer. Now, Chenesai, there's a theory of glass ceiling. Can you shed more light on your experiences?
The glass ceiling when it comes to women, accomplishments, goals, and wow, big question. Look, let's start here. I do not represent the majority of women in Africa or even in Zimbabwe. I am part of the privileged few, right? So in my world, I don't have the struggle with glass ceilings, right? I've had the opportunity to go to the best universities. I've had the opportunities to pursue my career. In fact, to pursue my passion without limit. That said, that is not atypical of an African woman's story. I am a mother of 2 sons, a beautiful son, my youngest being 2 months. I've got great family support that allows me to still go back to work and take care of my son and be a mother, be a wife, and play that role while successfully pursuing my career. That is not the story of the typical African woman. That is not the story of the Zimbabwean woman. The majority of the Zimbabwean women, the glass ceiling exists. And this is where we come back and talk about sustainable women's empowerment. And when I say it exists, it's because the majority of women are succumb to early childhood marriage. That already gives you a glass ceiling. So you can be so much, but if you are married off at 13, that's it. The majority of women in Zimbabwe, for instance, have children and then succumb to being housewives. And in this day and age, we've got women who are degree-holding women, professionals, that still cannot achieve what they want to fully achieve owing to the issues of cultural and social norms. So do glass ceilings exist in my experience and in my practice? Absolutely. Every day you encounter women that are seeing that glass ceiling have given up. And this is why when we talk about women empowerment, it is not rhetoric. We need to figure out methodologies that are going to sustainably empower these women. And one of them, in my experience and in my work, is education. Education that is sustainable, education that is thoughtful, and education that encompasses the real problems we have in our society, being the culture and social norms. For instance, when a girl child gets home in a rural setting after school, she is expected to go to the well to fetch water, while the boy child will probably be sitting around the fire or doing his homework. This is still the practice in our communities. So when you now look at around a corporate table, right, in corporate and private practice and so forth, I can say I'm confident because I have had the privilege to earn my confidence. But the majority of women don't have the same confidence that I have. So time and time again, they succumb to being below the patriarchal values of our communities. They succumb to those patriarchal values. So do glass ceilings exist? Yes, and we must talk about them. We need to talk about them in order for us to sustainably come up with a method and a way to empower our women to rise above the glass ceilings.
You mentioned about education as one of the tools that we can use to break the glass ceiling.
Yes.
What other tools can we use to fight against glass ceiling?
It ends with education. I believe when you look at prioritizing an argument or prioritizing our action plan and putting our weight behind an action plan that will successfully see us getting sustainable results in the framework of women's empowerment, we need to focus on education. But let's not look at education from a narrow framework. Let's look at education from a broad spectrum. Right? Education being part of it is also skills development. They are the girl children that were unfortunate cases that have not been able to go to school. What do we do with them? Right? They are children, they're girl children that are not efficiently academically strong. So when we look at education from a narrow base, we're looking at the academic strength in education, where we can actually do skills training. Right? Skills training coupled with synergized work with industry, where we now start looking at market access for the skills that we're developing. How do we train our girls to make them self-sufficient? Part of empowerment, a very fundamental element of empowerment is being able to be self-sufficient. The reason why we keep saying girls need to go to school so they get a job is because the only way you can truly be empowered is if you can take care of yourself. Right. In our society, I don't think this is a taboo to you as a male. It's expected that the male is the head of the household and is going to take care of the household. Right. Women are taken care of the men, by the men. This is what we grow up being socialized to understand. that we are taken care of by the men. The men is going to come and earn all the money and take care of the bills and so forth. What we're saying is there's nothing wrong with having a household where we have shared responsibilities, which is very akin to a lot of the households now. But interestingly, this is not a new practice. Even our grandmothers used to have shared responsibilities, right? So part of that strength is saying, how do we educate the girl child, whether we are talking about skills development or formal education, to a point where she can access the market, either by getting a job or selling her product, so she can earn an income that will allow her to be a responsible partner in her household.
You mentioned about skills development, and yourself, you're a designer.
Absolutely.
Can you share your experience, how you made it to the top?
I don't know if I'm at the top. We are in a very interesting space in our design industry, fashion design industry in Zimbabwe. You know, when I entered fashion, it's really by way of passion. I was very passionate about fashion designing and styling. But when I returned back to Zimbabwe, the first thing that came to my mind when I came back is the fact that there were no jobs. So I thought, hey, you know what? I've got an opportunity to trade in commodities, create employment in the meantime. It wasn't anything fancy, because my thing is you can change the world one person at a time. So even if you're working with a team and employing one person, that's enough for you to effect change eventually. So I started this my fashion brand, which is known as Chenesai now. With that in mind, how do we sustainably create employment, and how do we effectively trade in fashion product?
Thank you. You're still watching the Diplomatic Encounter. Please join us after the break. This is the third and final segment of the Diplomatic Encounter. For those who have just joined us, we are a program that gives you issues in the world of diplomacy. And in today's program, we are talking to Chenesai Mangoma, an international trade lawyer. Now, Chenesai, as a designer, you specialize in African print. Why African of all the designs that you can ever make in this world?
Well, look, I don't specialize in African print per se. My brand, Chenesai, seeks to remember and recover and reveal that which has sustained the African woman over the centuries. So my brand is more molded around the concept of celebrating to the world and showing the world what women of Africa have been doing over centuries. I'm currently working, as we speak, on a Mashingo collection. For instance, my Mashingo collection is going to be a dress that is inspired by the Mashingo woman. Why Mashingo? That's my starting point, because I am from Mashingo. I'm from Gutu. So the Mashingo dress is going to be an inspiration and tell the story of the woman from Mashingo. What the woman of Mashingo is like, and how the woman of Mashingo has meaningfully and sustainably contributed to our economy. I will do this across all the cities that we have in Zimbabwe, and that's what my brand does. So why do I use African print? Because I'm telling the African story, and I think African print per se it's the color. It's a celebration of color. It's the embracing of the people that we are. We are such a colorful people. So that's why I use African print. But the ethos of my brand, Chenesai, is to celebrate, to remember, to recover, and reveal to the world what African women have been doing, particularly right now, what Zimbabwean women have been doing. So yeah, look out for my Mashingo women. That will talk about the women of the Mashingo region and what they have been doing over the years, over the centuries, and tell about how they've contributed uniquely to the economy. My father always says Mashingo women are known popularly to be lawyers because we are argumentative. Well, the Mashingo collection will tell us more about that.
You mentioned about clothes as identifying with people. Now can you tell us as Zimbabweans, which type of dressing can we identify with? We know India has their sari, Nigerians have their, those coats and all.
Yes.
What about us Zimbabweans? What do we have?
It's no secret that we don't have national dress. But at the same time, I don't necessarily think it is a catastrophe, right? I have had the opportunity to live in different parts of the world. And one thing that has identified me as Zimbabwe is my ability to work with people from different parts of the world, right? Zimbabweans are gifted and talented. I think that is our coat of armor, right? We have this unique ability to go into spaces and be an influence and be a force, right? We cannot undermine that ability. I've lived in the US, right, and have an opportunity to work with people from Ethiopia, to work from people from Ghana, Nigeria. One thing about being Zimbabwean that I have celebrated, and which is my coat of armor, is my ability to work with those people. Maybe because of our socialization and our cultural setting in Zimbabwe, right? So I don't know if it's, maybe in my conceptualizing of things, it's not necessarily a train smash that we don't have a national dress per se. I think our dress can be our character, our attitudes, and our ability to be a force and an influence no matter where you seed us in the world. I lived in South Africa. What set me apart was not the clothes. It was just being Zimbabwean, my character, my attitude, my perseverance. All those characters are worn like a coat of armor. So when you see me, and which has been experienced, and I'm sure many other Zimbabweans across the world will share this, is people can tell you're from Zimbabwe. You don't need to be wearing Zimbabwean regalia. They will tell you from Zimbabwe. So it's such an honor to be Zimbabwean and having been raised under that setting in a way that sets us apart. And I hope we can go forth and celebrate it, not only overseas, but within our own country.
Indeed, you've traveled so many countries.
Yeah.
And they have enjoyed the benefits of your presence as a Zimbabwean,
Yeah.
as a well-groomed Zimbabwean.
Yes.
Now, what are some of the lessons that you have learned from those countries?
We need to serve our country. My unique experience from, I think, the USA, as well as South Africa in part, is patriotism. We need to be patriotic not only to talk about it, but to be it, right? And being patriotic is knowing that you are a responsible citizen that takes action and initiatives when things are not going right. Even when things are going right. As an active and responsible citizen, you need to play your part in community. We were silenced for so long. So we actually have lost that ability to understand what it means to be a responsible citizen. So what I have learned from the US, from South Africa, from Kenya, from Nigeria, is we must play our part as citizens. As has been said before, it's not what the government can do for you, it's what you can do for your government. It sounds like cliche, and in time of hyperinflation in Zimbabwe right now, it almost sounds impossible. But impossible doesn't exist until you start doing. I am pleasantly surprised, and I find great joy when I see women like Savannah Madamombe in her campaign, whose campaign is based on Fix Zimbabwe, Die Trying. It's so refreshing when you see Zimbabweans trying to do whatever it is that they're trying to do to bring our community, to make our community better. So instead of sitting and complaining all day long, the question is, what are you doing? It doesn't have to be $1 million project. It just has to be something.
Zimbabwe is in a new dispensation.
Absolutely.
Doubtlessly. So, what is your message to the people of Zimbabwe when it comes to trade? You're a well-traveled international trader.
Yeah.
What is your message maybe of encouragement to the millions of Zimbabwe who are watching this program?
We need not to be scared of rebuilding, right? We need to embrace the fact that we were broken and there is work to do. We cannot put a Band-Aid on an open wound. So we need to be able and open to learn new things, embrace technology, and start doing the work. I will come back to the fashion sector that I operate under. We have amazing designers. We have amazing cloth in Zimbabwe, cotton. It's no secret. However, right now we're at a point where we need to rebuild the fashion sector. Rebuilding for us to gain meaningful and sustainable market share would also involve us learning new processes. So before we can run, we might need to start walking. And walking means we need to put in place standards, regulations, systems that will not only ensure sustainability, but will ensure effective development. So my message right now to everyone and anyone who's doing anything and everything is, don't be scared to start from zero. We're operating from nothing. We must understand that. So in that, we need to be in it for the long game. We might start seeing results for the work that we're doing in the different sectors 3 years from now, because Rome was not built in one day. But once Rome stood, it stood for good. So in order for us to build a sustainable Zimbabwe, let's go back to the principles. Let's look at our policies. Let's look at our legislation. Let's align it with the 2013 Constitution. Let's look at those frameworks. Let's look at the developmental assistance frameworks. Let's synergize and put it all together. And let's bring civil society to the top so that we can all fight the battle together.
Thank you again, Chenesai.
My sincere pleasure.
This has been the Diplomatic Encounter. Hope you found this program informative as well as educative. Until we meet again, it's goodbye for now.